I have been trying to tell for a long time is the reason why Robert O. Becker gets canceled by the same group of people. Why? Because he's doing work on non-native EMF electropollution for the US Navy. And the story that people don't really understand is how this ties to the progression that I made in the Danny Jones podcast. This is MK Ultra, graduates to SRI, Stanford Research Institute. Then magically under Obama in 2013, you have the Brain Health Initiative. All of a sudden, everything goes to Central and South America. So I would have thought in some of these podcasts, ones I did with Danny, ones I've done with Adrian D'Amico, ones I did with Bulwark, but the last one, the big one, was when Breedlove came down here for 4 days and interviewed me, told them bits and pieces, and no one's asked me the real question. Why in the fuck did this thing morph? Well, turns out another guy, a part of this program, is a guy named Alan Fry. In the late 60s, he takes the work of Jose Delgado, the guy that everybody knows about, the bull and the wires in the head. And then I told Danny at the end of this process, they found out they didn't need wires, they didn't need chips, they could do it with light. And he goes, what? That is the last part of the story that nobody seems to understand. So they begin to realize that they can use light frequencies to destroy the leptin melanocortin pathways in the brain to control people. They don't need LSD. They don't need mescaline. They don't need anything else, okay? And the reason why this program gets changed is during its evolution, they find out that people that have heavily melanated skin are the most difficult to control, okay? So there's another DARPA program that you may have heard about. I'm sure Whitney Webb and Mark Godwin have heard about it, but have never linked it to this story. It's called the Targeted Individual Program. In other words, how you control people utilizing remote technology. Well, who's the guy that actually really discovered this whole thing? Alan Fry. Alan Fry is looked at a good guy in my world. Why? He's the first guy that showed that when you zap a brain with any type of electromagnetic radiation, it opens the blood-brain barrier. So you can take bad shit and get it in. What magically happens in the United States at that time? People start making processed food. What also magically happens? Drugs start to come on market, and they have a lot of fillers and preservatives in them. Guess what all those fillers and preservatives and all the fake processed shit was really about? It was about figuring out how to get toxins from your gut into your brain so that you could electromagnetically target them. That is actually what happens between MK Ultra into SRI. What do they find out in SRI? Where does the program stall? 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. That's magically when Obama says we're going to get rid of incandescent bulbs, we're going to go to LEDs. What do they find out? Because LED bulbs remove UV and red light, have a huge blue spike. It turns out the blue spike can actually be used to control people through the dopamine pathway. How does that work? You go back and listen carefully to what I said to Danny, and he clearly didn't get it, even though he's done podcasts with people that told him this in the past. Dopamine, or I should say melanin, breaks down into dopamine. If you open the blood-brain barrier, dopamine floods the brain and it causes brain damage. Anybody who's a healthcare practitioner, I guarantee you when Kevin listens to this, he'll understand it, knows that when we use dopamine in an ICU setting, we have to be extremely careful with it, when we're trying to elevate their blood pressure, because a low dose, a medium dose, or high dose can kill you. When people are in the ICU, they're around electromagnetic devices. This is the reason why. Because we're flooding their brain with dopamine, we're flooding their brain with serotonin. There's even something called the serotonin syndrome that y'all can look up and fact check Uncle Jack. This is the key things that Alan Fry finds out for DARPA. And then what does DARPA originally do? Not only are they using directed energy weapons to try to control this, they are now checking this at scale in the United States. So what two things happen at the end of Obama's term that you guys may remember that's tied to this story? there was two things that happened. The first thing is a young African-American attorney who went to Florida State named Myron May goes into the Florida State Library with a gun, shoots the library up, doesn't shoot anybody else. And what does he do? He sends 10 people a package with the story of what I'm telling you right now. And he says, I know they're targeting me, but I don't know why. How did this all start? It's a very interesting story when you delve into it. He's comes from a poor background, had no medical problems. He had a Fitzpatrick score of 4. He wasn't like Nairobi, Kenya, but pretty dark. He starts to date a pediatrician from New Mexico. And magically, after they're dating for a while, he starts to complain of horrible back pain around his kidney and adrenal gland. He starts telling her, I think I need to go to the doctor. She goes, no, just treat it this way, that way. He goes to see a doctor in New Mexico who's a known entity in the DARPA program. He gets prescribed medications for ADHD. The pediatrician goes, why in the hell would they put you on something like this? What happens from there? He goes back to Florida. His behavior becomes more bizarre. He's telling people that he hears voices in his head. He has horrible pain in his chest and he doesn't know why. Ultimately, something happens to him where he figures out that somebody from the outside is actually targeting him for a reason and he doesn't know why. Here's the key part of the story, Marty. Turns out when you have a lot of melanin both inside and outside your body, this direct targeting device is bidirectional. See, when you don't have a lot of melanin, when they shoot it into you, you actually become a zombie, an obedient idiot. But when you're highly melanated, because what does melanin do? It absorbs massive amounts of radiation. For those of you who don't believe this, you can actually go look at the tests that we did on the hydrogen bomb, okay, on the atolls in the South Pacific. You may be shocked to hear this, but when we did that test, the United States military didn't even know what the thermonuclear capability of the bomb was that they were going to set off. Turned out they thought it was going to be about 7.5 megatons. It turned out, reality of the test, it was 15 megatons. That means that the blast area went into areas where regular people from the South Pacific lived. There's pictures that show these people lost their melanin in certain places on their body. You know why? Because that melanin absorbed the radiation blast for them. Okay? That's documented out there. So the government begins to realize that if they're going to use these devices as a weapon of war, that they've got to test it at scale on different folks. Turned out all the stuff that you hear about the TI people that are out there, these are people that are the randomized controlled clinical trial of DARPA on their own people before this weapon is ready for prime time. Just so you know, Marty, you may be asking, well, the Russians had the same technology as us. Why don't we see the same program there? Well, the Russians try to warn us. And this is where Becker's research comes in. Do you know, and you can look this up, there used to be something called the woodpecker frequency that emanted from Ukraine that went all the way around the globe at a specific latitude. This was an EMF device that the Russians put out to warn the United States that if you guys don't change what you're doing in terms of adopting electromagnetic radiation through cell technology, you're going to create a huge problem for people. And then when the United States military didn't listen to them, what did Russia do? This is where the Moscow embassy event happens. Remember, you probably heard as a young man about Havana syndrome, where all these guys in Cuba got zapped, right? You probably don't remember learning anything about what happened in the Moscow embassy. The Russians took a pulse microwave device and pointed it at the US embassy in Moscow from 1967 all the way to 1973. In that time frame, they had more diagnoses of tinnitus, Meniere syndrome, voices, mental illness, but here's the big one. We had 3 straight ambassadors develop blood cancers. Okay? Turns out in 1973, Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, has to give hazard pay to anybody who was in the embassy at that time. Do you know how they solved the problem? You want to know where the idea of tinfoil hats came from, my friend? They put tinfoil all up in the U.S. embassy when they found out what the Russians were doing. And what did the Russians tell them? We're trying to warn you that what you're about to do is going to be a big problem. 1973, Marty. Guess what else happens in 1973? Becker does the key paper on the sanguine antenna to use RF radiation pulsed to check all the Trident submarines all over. And he finds out through his work that this is a huge problem. So the Secretary of Navy and the other parts of DARPA know that this is a big issue because they're working on both parts of this story. So Becker gets so frustrated from 73 to 77, kind of like Kevin was about his story that you've been documenting with him every time you have him on. And he goes on 60 Minutes and tells the world the truth. Guess what happens to him? He gets fucking Bernice Eddied. Literally, they take all his money away. How do you censor a scientist? You just take their money away. And basically, a guy that's twice nominated for the Nobel Prize for his work in tissue regeneration, utilizing bioelectricity, gets zapped. Why? Also, the government continue this DARPA program that then gets morphed in 2008. First to get rid of incandescence and then to put LEDs. Then it gets even more nefarious. Obama says we need to figure out how to get brown people more controlled. So they pick Central and South America. Why? They've got a good mix of Fitzpatrick's 2s, 3s, and 4s. They go down there and they start to perfect the targeting. What are they using to deliver the targets? They're using processed food. They're using jabs. They're using geoengineering. Things fall from the sky. And you may be saying, well, how does this really work, Jack? Like, what's the mechanism that's tied to it? This is where you don't get any of the Whitney Webb, Mark Godwin people understanding. When you open someone's brain blood barrier and you open up their gut barrier, that means that big toxins, higher atomic mass than a hydrogen proton, goes into places that it's not supposed to be. So, Marty, you're a smart guy. I think you know that Intel and AMD, when they make semiconductors, they have clean rooms, right? They don't want anything in there. Turns out your brain works on the same mechanism. How do we know that? Guess what Becker's work was on? He's the one that proves that our body works by semiconduction. They already took his research out. So what did the government do? They take high atomic mass elements and deliver them in ways that you can't imagine. How does this work, Marty? You have places in your body called the circumventricular organs. And remember, I'm a Bitcoiner, but what's my day job? I'm a brain surgeon. So I know a little bit something about the brain. The circumventricular organs sit around your hypothalamus and your thalamus. These are areas where you never have a blood-brain barrier. These become the target of DARPA. They start to deliver these things. Do you want to know why geoengineering really is a problem? Not only does it block the sun, but when this shit falls down in the ground, those elements wind up going through places where you don't have a blood-brain barrier. And if they can convince you to use those earphones that Apple sells, then they can really get you because it lets tons of stuff in. So all the keto snacks that all the food gurus want to sell you has nothing to do with the food. It has to do with all the shit that they put in there that's manufactured that has a higher atomic weight than should. What's the issue with drugs? Everybody knows the story about Columbine and every other school shooter, but you've never put it together. It's not the SSRI drug, it's the fillers and preservatives in it that are a problem. Here comes the big one, Marty. This is something Kevin didn't find out, but I'm going to tell you. We find out that every jab, not just the Pfizer one, every single one out there, including the one that was used in China, has 51 to 55 elements that are not supposed to be in there. You want to find out the really interesting part? All jabs have 100% chromium in them. Do you know why they pick chromium? It has a +6 oxidation state. What does that mean? Negative to +3. That means it's a much more tunable atom when it interacts with electromagnetic radiation. Want to hear something even crazier? Chromium isn't found in every single drug that Big Pharma makes. Did you know that?
I did not.
Right. So it gets better. You remember Aaron Brockovich? Remember the story about PG&E? What was the element that caused cancer in the people out there around their power lines and that place? Hexavalent chromium. Isn't that interesting, huh, Marty? So you got the story of these high atomic elements with non-native EMF, and it's always associated with these unusual diseases that humans are getting. This is the collateral effects of the bioweapons program. But it turns out, what DARPA finds out, is that the people that have the darkest skin are difficult to control. So why did I have to be careful with Huberman? Did you know that Huberman's father was a condensed matter physicist at Stanford? You know what that means? He studies things like melanin. I was concerned that Huberman's father was part of this program, and that's the reason I really didn't want to go and talk to him. You know what else Huberman is famous for studying? Cephalopods. You know what cephalopods use to get away? Ink. You know what the ink is made out of? Melanin. I didn't know if Huberman knew more than I thought he did. I found out that he's a fucking idiot, okay? So that was a good thing, but he never put two and two together.
Sup, freaks? Bitcoin is the ultimate scarce asset. Join Bitcoin macro expert Nick Bhatia at a live online event on March 17th for death, taxes, and 21 million. Learn how to shield your wealth, leverage tax-advantaged accounts, and secure your Bitcoin for future generations. Your financial advisor, accountant, or attorney might not be up to speed on Bitcoin, so invite them to join too. Register now at unchained.com/TFTC. That's unchained.com/TFTC. March 17th. Be there.
Basically what happens is they go down to Central and South America and they figured out the mix that they can use to control people. Do you remember the last year under Biden that Mayorkas and Biden opened the borders and that people were being bused to certain places? Those were the people that were heavily melanated that they put in places so they could control them. And how would they do that? Through altering frequencies on LED bulbs and the cell towers that were around them. Guess who else was eventually part of this program that Whitney Webb and Mark Godwin haven't figured out yet? That's where Elon Musk comes in. Elon Musk will be the useful idiot 10 years from now. Why? Because everything will go from a terrestrial ground-based level to above your head. Why? They're going to do the same thing that Delgado did in the 60s. Figure out how to do it utilizing HARP arrays. They're going to figure out how to do it using satellites through targeting, okay? This is the reason why you see people like Callie and Casey Means in the Maha movement. Casey and Callie are tied to making sure that Bobby can't act. In other words, you've heard how Saylor uses the term ossification. Well, Callie and Casey are ossification on this other side, so that Bobby never gets to this story. They're going to let Bobby fix the food. They're going to let Bobby fix this, fix that. But they have figured out in Central and South America that all they need is the messenger RNA platform to continue to deliver these things in. And these papers out there, Marty, they're out there that show you the jabs have these atoms in them. When you ask yourself the question, you listen to the functional medicine guys, why is it that the vaccine schedule is given to children? Well, what's the other protection system that we found in MK Ultra, that we found in SRI, and that we found in Brain Health Initiative? Myelin, not melanin, myelin, the outside electrical insulator of the brain, doesn't show up in people till they're 25 years old. So if you wanted to create billions of useful idiots to control, wouldn't it be smart for you to get your technology in them before their brain was myelinated or their skins or interiors were melanated? So this is the reason why from 1986 to right now, we went from 6 vaccines to 72. Because the more of that you get in, it's like having an A team, a double A team, or a triple A team. Got it?
Yep.
That's what's going on. So to give you some more juice for this, before Myron May did his little maneuver at Florida State, do you remember the guy that went into the Navy yards in Virginia and Baltimore? Do you remember the key thing that is very hard for people to find now? He had 3 letters carved into the rifle that he used to kill the people. ELF. You know what ELF stands for? Extreme low frequency radiation. That's exactly what they're using. And it turns out the Fry effect that most of you can go study, this is pulsed microwaves. That's what they used in Cuba. But it turns out that you can use pulsed RF. That's what they were testing in the people in the United States. And it turns out RF is much more difficult with people that have melanin. Did you know that that Navy shooter was also an African American? Now, he killed 13 people, but he killed the people that he thought were targeting him. Got it? Mm-hmm. They have now, for the last 10 years, think they have a handle on how now to target these people. So now they're bringing people that have brown and black skin into the United States, into places where they think militarily they will need it. And when they need them, they'll turn it on. Let's get back to Elon Musk. Go look at any post from Elon Musk and Neuralink. You know what he says? You know what's on Twitter? Hey, we took this guy that's paralyzed and we put our device in him and now we can make him walk. Isn't that great? So that's the utopian side of the technocrat. But you know what? You know why they're doing that?
They always start
with
the paraplegics. That's how they sell it.
No, but do you know why? You can laugh, but I don't want you to laugh because I'm not laughing. Do you know why they picked them?
No.
Because people that are paralyzed have an open blood-brain barrier. People that have neurologic damage have an open blood-brain barrier. So guess what? They're the ideal people to treat. Do you think Elon Musk knows this? No, I don't think he does. But I think they do. In fact, Elon Musk just came out in the last 3 months and said non-native EMF has no effect. That's how I know he's the useful idiot. If anybody should know that it has an effect, it's Elon Musk. He's a fucking engineer. But guess what? He doesn't know anything about Becker's work either. Why? Just like Bernice Eddy, it was whitewashed. That's the reason why Kevin McKiernan didn't know anything about it, why Philip Buchholz didn't know anything about it. So what am I telling you right now? Why'd I go to Prague, Bitcoin Prague, to warn all you motherfuckers that have Bitcoin that they're going to do the same thing to you. And if you think I'm lying to you, Marty, you can do your homework on this one. Recently in China, they just targeted someone in the Ethereum network that had $1.4 billion and got him to sell his money. Do you know why? He was programmed to give his keys up. So here's why I really want to talk to Marty Bent. I don't want any Bitcoiner to remember their seed phrases ever again, because now they have a way to get it. Got it? That's my message. That is really my take-home message for guys like you, because guess what? They killed Satoshi, okay? They know they can't control it. Now they're trying to figure out ways they can get to it. So the SV40, as I said in the Danny Jones podcast, is to taper the Ponzi scheme. It's to kill a lot of people that are due money. When I told Kevin that, he was stunned. Kevin gets where I'm going with all of this, but this part of the story that nobody has really asked me about, like, how do all these things fit? Why are they all there? I decided Marty Bent was the right place to drop the nuclear weapon. Why? You're a Bitcoiner. You've had Kevin on multiple times. You've talked to Whitney Webb. You've talked to Godwin. You've talked to all these people, but you know what? Uncle Jack's getting really fucking frustrated sitting here in El Salvador with you guys mentally masturbating, not putting everything together. Why? Because I'm worried about you, Marty. I'm worried about Bitcoiners. We have made the correct decision. The biggest criminals in the world are in Washington, D.C., but they're in the Pentagon, and they are controlling the idiots that people keep voting for. The reason we keep voting for idiots has a lot to do with this story that I'm telling you right now. And the fact that Elon has uncovered through Doge how the whole program's working, this is a good thing. But that's why I'm telling you, I think he's not a nefarious guy yet. He's being groomed as a useful idiot. This is exactly what General Groves did in the Manhattan Project. He didn't let Oppenheimer know everything. He didn't let Teller know everything. He didn't let Einstein or Bohr know everything. Why? The architects of the whole plan, they're the only ones that knew everything. And right now, guys that are in and around Trump, specifically Besant, Lutnick, Elon, Peter Thiel, these are the guys that are all being used to actually change the Rockefeller, Rothschild empire into a technocratic control. Remember, you don't need to control money when you can control people. That's the Meyer-Lansky idea. They've now taken it through technology at global scale. So when I see you at a Bitcoin meeting and I see you wearing those AirPods and I tell you, please take those out of your head, I'm not doing it to be a dickhead. I'm actually trying to protect you from somebody taking your Bitcoin. Everybody in Bitcoin knows about SIM swap attacks and things like that. This is the biologic SIM attack. I want you to know that the people that we're dealing with, these are the most nefarious people on the planet. They cannot be trusted at all. I'm going to say something here, first time probably publicly on a podcast. This is the reason I no longer trust Michael Saylor. It's also the reason I no longer trust Cynthia Loomis. Cynthia Loomis, most of the things that she's saying, she tells us the things we want to hear, but she's keeping guys like A16Z and Mark Andreessen in the game, and the jackasses from Ripple, so that they can keep getting their PAC money. That's really what the goal is. That's what the whole stockpile reserve bullshit's about. This is the reason why Trump is, showing the world that he's a shitcoiner, because he is. He knows that he has to replace all this USAID money with something else. And that's the game plan I think's going on. And I think the thing that worries me about Saylor the last year, he's done a lot of good things for us. But the one bad thing is he keeps harping on this store of value and not, using it as currency. I'm just going to tell you that that is a very slick way to get people to realize the most important part of Bitcoin is a loyal title. It means self-custody. Self-custody is a loyal title. And if you allow somebody to take a loyal title away from you, you are a fucking idiot. And I think we're being conditioned right now by this big corporation that owns 500,000 Bitcoin to be okay with letting Scott Bessent and Coinbase, Kraken, even, the one person I trust right now is Caitlin Long, because she's the one, in 2018, 2019 started warning people, hey, this whole thing about banks custodying Bitcoin is probably not a good idea. And then she's the only person I know that's pointed out why Larry Fink and Lutnick came together about the ETFs, why the ETFs are another way for which them to try to control the Bitcoin market, in nefarious ways. And I think when you see this whole story laid out and where it started, the biologic side is so incredibly important in this story, Marty. And that's the reason why I'm very, very happy, that you have highlighted Kevin. Kevin is involved in this. He understands, the 5D warfare that's really going on here. I want everybody to know, stay and be a decentralized savage, but you need to be way more vigilant than you think.
Yeah. That, yeah, you are connecting a lot of dots here too, particularly bring it back to Kevin and what's happened over the last 6 months, like RFK specifically. I mean, you, Raul McCauley on the Danny Jones podcast and really called it out. Like it's almost like a limited hangout. We're shifting from focus on the jabs to preventative health, which everybody knows is a good thing, but it has been odd that the focus on what I would deem to be a crime against humanity has been swept under the rug. And then even Kevin, he's been attacked by people in that sphere, Alex Berenson specifically, who was part of the Twitter files. And it seems like anybody is trying to get this information out either gets co-opted or...
Oh, there's another one, Sasha Lapatova. She's also a spook. And she has been trying to undercut Kevin for a while. Kevin is too nice a guy. He's not going to call it out, but you probably know me from my Twitter. My mouth's not a fucking bakery. I'm going to go after people when I think they're doing nefarious things to savages. And I look at anybody who owns Bitcoin as a savage. You may not be wise about the mitochondrial health side of things, but I look at it like I'm that old Bitcoiner that's lived through a lot of this stuff and know how this process has been put together. I can tell you that I was brought into Bitcoin by somebody who's being harmed by this DARPA system that knew a lot more than you think he knows, and sold it to somebody who now is the modern day Lee Harvey Oswald. I want people to know really what's going on, because I've just made a lot of predictions to you, Marty. You're going to be able to now follow and track this. A lot of things that are going to happen are going to make sense. Maybe now you can begin to understand why Larry Page and Lutnick were in the Oval Office with Trump and said, hey, I think we should start selling warrants, on vaccines and things we use, and we should make money off that. I want you to think about how such a shitcoin idea that is when you actually think about it. And, just so you know, I made sure, I told people in Bitcoin Clubhouse, specifically American HODL, and one of the guys working on, Lummis's bill, Zach Shapiro. I said, I'm just telling you, fucking Lutnick is absolutely someone you need to avoid. He is a huge problem. And when Trump moved him from Treasury to Commerce, I was like, okay, still a problem. And then when he brings Brissett in, I'm like, dude, this guy's chops, he's a Fabian. He's tied to Alan Dulles. He's tied to the World Economic Forum. I like some of the stuff he's talking about with tariffs and things like that, and going back to a time, before the Federal Reserve Act. But remember what I told you, Marty, what's the real game plan? The game plan here is we're going to destroy the Rothschild Rockefeller control system, and we're going to install the technocrats. But I want to make sure you know who the technocrats are. It's DARPA, okay? Peter Thiel works for DARPA. Donald Trump works for DARPA. J.D. Vance is DARPA, okay? That's who's running this game. And the more we use technology, the worse it is. I'll give you another one. The Solariport chick. She's always talking shit about Bitcoin. She doesn't understand that Bitcoin is not like all the other cryptos, okay? Bitcoin is the only out for this system. Even if we have technocratic control, because it's fully decentralized, you can get out, but you have to self-custody. You cannot allow your Bitcoin to be in someone else's hands. I can't stress this enough, that the message that has just started to ooze from Saylor's mouth for the last year is a problem. And maybe now some of you who know Dorsey's a good friend of mine, why he showed that video on Twitter with Michael becoming an XRP coin. Now you understand why. We are warning you, this is the same idea that Big Pharma does with you. When you go to the pediatrician and you're sick, you expect the pediatrician to write you a prescription. We have made that the norm in centralized medicine. And I believe what's happening from the people on the inside of Bitcoin is they are trying to make the norm that you're okay calling up the guys from Unchained Capital, say, fuck it, let me just put my money with Fidelity or Schwab. I don't want you to do that. I'm telling you, it's a huge risk. And you don't realize the risk because you don't realize that DARPA now has the ability to get your seed phrases. And many people, I guarantee you, Marty, when you release this, they're going to hear this and go, this Jack Kruse is crazy. He's this and that. Go search the guy in Ethereum that just gave up $1.4 billion and posted.
He signed a message, yeah.
You got it. He posted that he did it. I'm going to tell you even something crazier. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. I'm going to make another prediction for the Marty Ben podcast. Within 2 or 3 years, you will find out that someone in the Ethereum Foundation is supporting with huge amounts of money someone in the messenger RNA platform, supporting their research. Mark my words. They're not your friends either.
Yeah. The narrative is pretty, it's funny. that we're talking about self-custody, and I think the narrative of Bitcoin is digital real estate, it's digital property, it doesn't compete with the dollar, has been completely misguided. I was on stage last week sticking up for Bitcoin as a medium of exchange currency that you should self-custody. I'm going to record with Parker Lewis either later today or tomorrow on his most recent paper, but I too agree.
Do me a favor. When you talk to Parker, before you hit the record button, ask Parker about the last meeting that him and I had face-to-face. Ask him specifically about it and why I'm asking you to ask. I think you'll be very interested because it probably will start some interesting discussions between you and Parker on that podcast.
Yeah. I might even wait till he might be right outside right now. I might ask him.
There you go. That's beautiful.
Yeah. It does feel like we're at this inflection point where, at least in the Bitcoin space, it seems like Bitcoin has been identified as a threat and people are being placed to sort of co-opt and control the threat. And I guess my question to you is, in your mind, what is, the best outcome besides people really internalizing that they need to self-custody and not give up their keys? Like, what does an ultimate win in this battle look like against these people trying to force us into this panopticon?
I think the number one thing, the way I look at it, and I'm going to take the biologic lens. There was a time in Earth's history after we evolved that the human population got down to 70 to 100,000 for a variety of different reasons. From that 70 to 100,000, we now turned into 8 billion. I look at the Bitcoin community as that 70 to 100,000. It doesn't mean the rest of people are going to die. They're just going to be the economic slaves. Okay. They're going to be the people that Klaus Schwab and DARPA are trying to create. And what I'm saying is that if we all stick together and watch each other's backs, I look at this, Marty, you have eyes, Parker has eyes, Dorsey has eyes. You are expert at seeing things that Uncle Jack doesn't see. But I happen to be expert at seeing things that you guys don't see. And I think that when we get together and do podcasts like this, I think when we get together and we share each other's tweets, I think when we sit down on, say, stages together and we have discussions like this, to me, this is the stuff that we should be talking about in Bitcoin meetings that nobody wants to talk about, because we are our own country without a border. And I think we proved the world that when we got Trump elected. We were the ones that pushed him over the line. The problem is, if we're being honest, a lot of the shitcoiners helped us. That's why the shitcoiners got David Sachs. That's why they've co-opted Lummis. That's why they've got a seat at the table. And I don't think as maxis, we can be upset with that. Why? Because remember, we're the predators, they're the prey. Predators always need prey. We actually need the shitcoiners to do stuff like this. So I look at this new society building that we are the masters and the shitcoiners are our cows. And we are going to use them to build a new world that we live in. If other people want to come into it, the price of admission is simple. Just buy Bitcoin. That's all you need to do. We're not asking you to do anything else. But once you come into the tribe and you understand what we're about, that we're about sovereignty, freedom, and that we take it to the nth degree. We even go past what's in the Second Amendment. And the things that I'm worried about, the Second Amendment is meant to protect yourself from acute lead toxicity. What I'm trying to tell you now, Marty, is that they're not coming after us with guns because they know we'd shoot them. They're coming after us with needles to kill us. And they're using electromagnetic radiation to do this silently so that we have no earthly idea what's really going on. And I'm going to tell you, the big risk that I see with Bitcoiners, all of you fuckers are addicted to technology. Like, I can't tell you how sick to my stomach I get when I see all the Apple things in your ears and all the other bullshit. Look, I told Matthias Kuchar, the head of Prague, last year when I got on the stage, I said, dude, this stage will kill anybody with all the light you got on it. So I'm going back there this year. So is Kevin. Me and Kevin are going to be speaking in Prague. And I told Matthias, when me and Kevin come on, you make sure that it's all red light. You put red light on the stage. And I said, then we'll be A-okay. Why? Because really, Marty, the message that I want to get to people is actually the message that I'm delivering to you on this podcast. I want every Bitcoiner to know, you don't have to like me. I just want to make sure that you have Windex on your glass eyes and you know who the enemies really are. I want to make sure that you are an informed individual. I look at this podcast and delivering it to you. I'm doing my informed consent with you. I look at you as my patient. Why? Because you own Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the money of decentralized medicine. And you potentially are a future client of the doctors that I'm training. And I am trying to protect a flock that I think is the most valuable flock on the planet. Why? Because you are first principle thinkers. You're decentralized. I just need to get you decentralized everywhere. And I want people to know that the reason I'm a hard ass, even on people that are doing good things, I mean, you know that I've gone after Whitney and I've gone after Mark in several places. The reason why is half-truths always lead to full lies. We need to understand our enemy, dude. Just look at Sun Tzu's book about the art of war. Everything I've told you in this podcast is actually about that book. You don't know what this enemy is capable of doing. And they are using an angle of attack that none of you are prepared for. Not one of you. In fact, most of you are walking right into their hands because all of you are addicted to what the technocrats are selling you.
Yeah, and I can see a lot of people listening to this and be like, it's crazy. But to me, it's like they've literally, going back to Havana syndrome, that was somewhat of a quote unquote conspiracy theory for the longest times. And then it was made apparent, like, yes, this is happening. And then in the defense tech startup world, I mean, Joe Lonsdale's talked about this pretty openly on CNBC. Like, they're actively building microwave technology to do things. I mean, they market it as we're going to shoot down drones and sort of fry people.
Well, remotely. That's the utopian side of it. The dystopian side, you need to know how it works. So, like, I just wrote a blog yesterday because I knew I was coming on with you. I decided to write this blog right before. I'm getting ready to talk to a group of older Bitcoiners that have a lot of money tomorrow. And they asked me, many of them are involved in the defense industry. They're like, we want to know. We know that we've worked on this project, but we want to know exactly how it works. So you brought up the issue with Havana syndrome. I'm going to explain to you exactly how this works and why the tech is so ingenious. Inside your cochlea, you have a melanin sheet. It sounds crazy to you. It's inside a bone that you use for hearing, tied to the endolymphatic sac. What you don't know, it also is a place that doesn't have a blood-brain barrier. So when they use pulsed electromagnetic radiation, depending on the frequency, that depends on what you get distally. What is the ultimate endpoint in your brain? It causes a traumatic brain injury. Why? Because this isn't the way the system was evolved to work. It was evolved to work differently. But they have now disconnected your antenna, your GPS system in your brain. How did they do that? By putting these heavy atomic elements inside your CSF. What does that do? It ruins the fidelity of the antenna system. If you think that this is crazy, just so you understand, your thalamus in the center of your brain is known as where all the five senses come in. Your thalamus is actually what allows you to connect to the sun and the earth to create biologic rhythms. You've heard of those, called the circadian rhythms. Do you know what the emission of the thalamus is? 7.83 hertz. You know what that is? That's the Schumann resonance of the earth. Where does that come from, Marty? That's when the solar wind hits our ionosphere, you make an aurora, electricity comes down in lightning. The ionosphere that we live in on this tectonic surface is like the inside of a guitar. Every time electricity hits the planet, it creates a waveform. That waveform is 7.83 hertz. Your brain, every living thing, let me be clear about this. Every living thing on the planet emits this alpha wave. What did MK Ultra, SRI, and the Brain Health Initiative teach DARPA? That if you disconnect people from that signal, you can take over the controls of the brain. So what did they do then? Once they take that away, then they start using directed energy weapons to target different senses in you. And what's the ultimate effect? They started to do this at scale in the Iraq War. Do you want to know why all these guys came back in the theater with PTSD? That's the reason why. Now, I'm not going to tell you this, but I left my practice in Nashville because I knew this was going on. I've never told anybody this. I went to Mississippi specifically to work at the Hattiesburg Clinic. Do you know why I went? Hattiesburg Clinic had a government contract with the military where people would come and go from the theater. Do you know what that allowed me to do? It allowed me to examine people pre and post for these injuries. Got it? And then when I left there, where did I go? Opened up a TBI clinic in New Orleans. So if you don't think that Uncle Jack has been working on this for a long time, you're out your fucking mind. And then how was I able to do all this? Marty, I wasn't connected to the system. I don't give a fuck about your fiat money. Bitcoin is what allowed me to stay outside this system and do this. That's the key. And that's what you need to understand. That's the reason why I actually care about you guys more than I care about my fiat friends. My fiat friends have made a decision to stay plugged into the system that is going to taper the Ponzi scheme. Marty, I've tried to tell them in no uncertain terms. I can tell you, I've told Rick Rubin this story. Jack Dorsey, his orange-pilled Rick, we've been telling him and telling him and telling him. It's hard for people to fathom that this stuff's going on there. But guess what? When you look up Fry syndrome or microwave syndrome, you'll find out that I'm exactly right, that they can use pulse microwave to make voices in your head. And you know what the irony is when you talk to people who have had this problem? I've talked to so many soldiers with this problem. They have actually heard people voices coming from the center of their head. Do you know why? Because that's where the thalamus is emitting the antenna signals. So guess what? The people that have melanin in their brain, they're the ones that actually can harm the government. The government they want to stay completely clandestine and covert. That's the reason why people need to upgrade their melanin systems. It makes you more resistant to this. So if you want to keep your seed phrases clean 30 years from now, if you're one of those people that keeps it in your head, then you better make sure that you live inside the tropics and that you're outside like a rotisserie chicken. I'm going to tell you, the people that have to worry the most are people that lived in geoengineered cities. If you want to know the reason why the cities are being geoengineered, remember, if you don't use processed food, if you don't use supplements, if you don't use drugs, what's the next way to get you? Geoengineer it, the shit falls out of the sky and goes right in the ethmoid sinus, in the roof of your nose where your pituitary has no blood-brain barrier. Dude, they have thought of it all. They're that good. And some of these people that came back from the theater at this military base, I used to take CSF samples from them. And I would send them to a place, not to do an MRI of their brain. I do nuclear magnetic resonance of their CSF to look for those atoms. Guess what? I didn't see one person that came back with PTSD that didn't have those atoms in their CSF. So, Marty, you want to take a guess now why Uncle Jack lives in El Salvador?
Increase that melanin.
You want to take a guess why the FBI, CIA, and DARPA has been to visit Uncle Jack a lot in the last 10 or 12 years? They wanted to know exactly what I told you in this podcast. They wanted to know how much I knew. Well, guess what? Now you know why I didn't want to go talk to Rick and Huberman. Because when you allow this shit to come out, dude, it's not a good place to be. Remember what Voltaire said? When you start to talk against the people in power, it's a huge issue. And am I worried about it? Yeah. Now I know that the globalists, the people in DARPA, are now coming to El Salvador. You don't believe it? Remember the adopting Bitcoin meeting that we had here in November? Mm-hmm. Sergey Brin magically turned my feed off I was the only person that got turned off from the stage. Did you know that?
I did not know that. On YouTube?
Ask Nico. Nico and his partner. They couldn't believe it. Everybody else, Max and Stacy, had no problem. But Uncle Jack, the internet got turned off in El Salvador.
Huh. That is fascinating. Because I've seen this too. Like Cody Wilson from Defense Distributed, he's described it the same way, where he was 24, naive. The Voltaire quote really made me think of it. Where he was just naive, interested in the stuff and passionate about it. And then they went and dragged him through the mud for the better part of a decade. And he's still fighting. But this athletic death that individuals really end up having to produce to get this information out there is,
well, I have to put almost all of my stuff behind a paywall. Why? Because you mentioned before about the Callie Means, Danny Jones, and Mary Talley Bowden podcast. I just want to make sure you understand. I think Mary is one of those people that Bitcoiners are going to hire. But remember what happened to her. She's still plugged into the fiat side. She doesn't understand Bitcoin yet. She just had to pay $266,000 to protect herself from the Texas Medical Board. Mm-hmm. Dude, DARPA's weaponizing medical boards and hospital bylaws against doctors who fall out of line. If you want to know the truth, that's really what's going on with Mary, but Mary doesn't know it. I want you guys to know it because guess what? Mary is going to be a good guy. She's trying to help you guys avoid the problems. As much as I hate a guy like Peter McCormick, because I don't like him at all. I think he's a real problem. Peter took a couple of jabs so he could go all over the world and talk. Peter needs Mary Talley Bowden more than you can know. She's trying to make ivermectin over the counter everywhere in the world. Peter's never going to get the drugs that he needs because he took those jabs. And he has no idea what his real risk is. And I told you, I don't like him. But remember, Marty is part of our family. You know what that means? That means I have a duty to make sure, because he's got a big mouth. Maybe he can save some of those communist bastards in the EU by getting them to buy Bitcoin and get off their fiat. I mean, it's the truth. And we need to look at ourselves as a decentralized army, because that's really what we are. And we are aligned because we have our alloidial title. What I want is I need to keep you guys as healthy can be. What am I most interested in Bitcoiners? Head up. Okay? I want you guys to be so freaking smart and become first principle thinkers, because I'm just going to tell you, it's just not good enough to be intelligent. You have to realize that first principle thinking is decentralized thinking. It's the thing that will keep you out of making mistakes in your life. Like why you won't take affiliate codes, why you won't, sell supplements to hurt somebody. This is the reason why I do things that are crazy. Like people ask me all the time, Jack, why don't you tell people who's got the best red light? Because the best red light's the fucking sun. Okay. That's the reason why. Jack, why don't you let us advertise on, different things on your site, with, our paleo snacks or our carnivore snacks? Because your shit, I've put in an MRI scanner and it's got fucking bad shit in it. And I know that almost every Bitcoiner out there uses Apple iPods. I don't want you guys fucking using this stuff. But, it sounds crazy when I come out against Peter Attia or Rhonda Patrick and I say the things that I say, or even Huberman. They have no idea why I'm telling you what I'm telling you, because I have had to be clandestine. That's why most of my stuff is behind Patreon. When you guys go read my quantum engineering series and you're a Bitcoiner, you may not know a lot of science, but you know what you're going to do after you hear this podcast? You're going to go, Jack just taught us absolutely everything that we're going to need to know for the next 50 years, how to avoid this technocratic system that's replacing the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. Because I got news for you. You wonder how much power this system has? The guys that put their fingers on the nuclear codes, they're worthless too. Nuclear weapons are worthless in this. Jason Lowry hasn't even gone far enough. His book, he ain't where I'm at. Why? Because if you can control the people that control the nuclear codes, what good are the bombs? You can use them anytime. You can have somebody who's not even in the tight circle start the whole mix. So like the story of what's going on in Ukraine right now, the story that's what's going on in Russia, bro, one of the things that Trump has done that I think is good, I don't think Russia is our enemy. I think the people in Ukraine, the people in the Middle East and in that desert, those are the people that are our enemy. Those are the people we need to be really careful with. And those are the people that keep pushing us to all these wars. We need to stay out of wars. We need to focus on building our country back. But the savages that are in that country need to understand they need to build citadels to protect themselves from the people that are in Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon. Why? Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, all those dudes in the Federalist paper, they were right. It's the bankers, now the technocrats. I'm going to tell you, when we come together at Bitcoin meetings, we need to have a Continental Congress, but it needs to be filled with Bitcoiners. Parker Lewis is one of the perfect people, I think, for you to talk to after talking to me, because Parker gets this. Parker understands. I think he really gets that we need to get a core group of Bitcoiners to understand that our biggest risk right now isn't the people that I think the old cypherpunks are worried about. The bankers are now small potatoes. The guys that are in the Pentagon are the ones we got to worry about.
Yeah. I completely agree. And on the getting immersed in wars in Ukraine or Israel, this is what I tweeted out last night. It's our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world, was George Washington in his farewell speech. We need to get out.
Right. And that's why I love coming on and talk to you, because look, I follow your tweets. I know you and I, you can tell the people out here, you and I have never met. We've never talked, but we kind of have. We both have an ambient awareness of who each other is. And the ethos that you put in that tweet is exactly where I come from. George Washington easily could have been a monarch for what he did in the American Revolution, but what did he do? He said, no. He goes, I don't want to become what I just replaced. He goes, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The documents are out there. Let's follow the documents. And what I'm saying, I guess, to you very clearly, and as I told you before, my mouth's not a bakery. Our founding document is that white paper. Don't forget it. And make sure that the people that are around you that you trust the most, that they see it that way too. And those are the people that we build our world around. We can still have our world in the middle of this fiat shitstorm. I don't need the government to have an SBR. I don't need the government to own Bitcoin. Why? I need fucking savages to own Bitcoin. And I need savages to know that they have to perform supreme self-custody. I mean, you ask Parker Lewis, I've probably sent him more people than you can imagine. In Nashville, one of his guys came up to me and said, Jack, we'd like to do something for you, off the cuff. You know what I told him? I said, fuck that. I'm not interested. You take care of these savages. That's all I want you to do. These are our people. These are the people that we're going to build this world around. And dude, I believe that. Like, it's part of my DNA. It's part of the reason that I've said publicly that Kevin McKiernan, he doesn't need a Nobel Prize, because the Nobel Prize isn't good enough for him. He needs a decentralized Nobel Prize. We in Bitcoin need to come up with a prize for people like Kevin. Maybe we all chip in and it's 1 Bitcoin a year that we give to somebody who represents what we want. That way we can resonate out to the fiat cucks out there what we're about.
I completely agree. Own the frame, own the awards, own the narrative. I think this conversation is going to be big for the narrative, and hopefully it's the first of many, because I think the noise is only going to increase from here as things accelerate. And like you were saying on the strategic Bitcoin reserve, that my newsletter this morning was the real strategic Bitcoin reserve is the Bitcoin held in wallets of the public, individuals that make up that public. That's true.
And I totally agree with that. I'm glad, this is more proof that quantum biology is acting through this global electric network. You write that, and then I come on here and we talk about it, but neither one of us talked about it beforehand. That's quantum entanglement, my friend. It's just like this story, that I told Huberman and Rick, and I told Breedlove about the kid with that got killed and whose heart was in someone else about the French fries. It's exactly the same thing. People don't understand that brains can be yoked together. And it turns out DARPA figured this out, and they're trying to steal that connection. They are trying to come in and control us in ways that you guys can only, you can't even fathom. And as long as we keep our connection strong and we keep resonating with each other, we're all like tuning forks that are out there. And I don't expect everybody to know the hardcore science. You want to learn it, I will teach it to you on Patreon. But I think the single most important part of the story is for people to listen to what you and I have been talking about for an hour and a half, that you don't have to like somebody, you still be in battle with them. And that's how I look at Bitcoiners. Just like your family, you got a brother-in-law that you can't fucking stand, or a mother-in-law you can't stand. Doesn't mean when the chips are down, you're going to throw them in a wood chipper. You just may talk shit about them at, Thanksgiving. But I feel the same way about some of my patients. I treat them like drill sergeants. Why? I'm trying to get them ready for the battle that's coming. That most of them don't understand, what the art of war that DARPA can use against us. And once you're aware of what your enemy is capable of, then guess what? They can't hurt you, because you'll know how to counter their moves. And here's the crazy thing, Marty. What I learned in studying MK Ultra, SRI, and the Brain Health Initiative, that all one needs to do is make like the Sphinx and eat like a great white shark. It's the simplest decentralized message you could ever imagine. Ground every morning, look to the sun, and make sure you get enough sun so that you can absorb anything they throw at you. And I mean that literally and figuratively. If you do that, you're good.
I think a lot of people, at least in my circle in Bitcoin, have been taking your advice to heart. Sun, steel, stay away from big pharma, eat pure foods. It's certainly affected my life.
Well, I'm going to say one more thing that I think I need to say, and I don't. This could be a rhetorical question, or you can get into it. I'll tell you one of my big concerns. One of my big concerns is when we get our meetings and we come together. I think we're becoming fish in a barrel for them. I think we need to start thinking about doing our meetings from now on in a decentralized fashion. I think we need to do it like this, online only. And I think we need to separate up, just like the federal government doesn't keep everybody together on Inauguration Day. I think we need to be a little bit smarter